We begin with President Trump labeling the bipartisan government funding and border security negotiations as a waste of time. Yesterday, the president told reporters that he would declare a national state of emergency if there's no funding for his border wall. Here is where the House Speaker stands and where he stands exactly 2 weeks before the funding deadline.
There's not going to be any wall money in the legislation. Is there a place where enhanced fencing, Normandy fencing, would work? Let them have that discussion.
Could I have done it differently? No, not really. I mean, I think by having the shutdown, we've set the table for where we are now. If I didn't do the shutdown, people wouldn't know. They wouldn't understand the subject.
If there's no money,
I would do that. Yeah. I would do that.
Nancy Pelosi said this morning that there is not going to be a wall in this deal, but she did say she'd be open to other kinds of physical barriers. Would you accept that?
No, because if there's no wall, it doesn't work. She's just playing games. So if there's no wall, it doesn't work. If you go to Tijuana and you take down that wall, you will have so many people coming into our country that Nancy Pelosi will be begging for a wall. She'll be begging for a wall. She will say, Mr. President, please give us a wall. I think Nancy Pelosi is hurting our country very badly by doing what she's doing. And ultimately, I think I've set the table very nicely. I think people understand. Well, they understand, Peter. They didn't know what was going on at the southern border. Now they know. They had no idea the amount of crime, the amount of drugs, the amount of human trafficking, which can be stopped with a proper system.
Set the table for an emergency declaration.
I've set the table. I've set the stage for doing what I'm going to do.
And you'll wait out the 21 days before you take it?
Yeah, I'm going to wait till the 15th. I think it's a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, Willie, he keeps saying he set the table. He keeps saying that he set this up perfectly. I mean, he doesn't realize that politically he set the table and he's what's for dinner. Like he has cooked himself. He has cooked the Republican Party. Their numbers collapsed. Nobody believes him anymore. He's completely, this has been a disaster for the past 3 weeks. And here we go, part 2 of it. And if you were a Republican on Capitol Hill, you've got to be sitting there thinking, my God, how low is he going to drag this party?
Joe, I talked to some people on Capitol Hill, Republicans, yesterday. They are furious that the president is taking this line. They know, and they've now come out on camera and said it again and again. Shutdowns are bad. We do not want another shutdown. Please, Mr. President, stay on the sideline. Let us work with Nancy Pelosi. We can figure something out. I'll read Speaker Pelosi's quote again. This is pretty definitive. There's not going to be any wall money in the legislation. That first bid, that first offer that Democrats put out, not only did it not have any wall funding, it didn't mention a wall, didn't mention a barrier of any kind, although Speaker Pelosi did say, we can do a fence if you want to call it a wall, go ahead, but there's not going to be wall money. President Trump tweeting, Joe, all morning yesterday. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, what's so weird is, again, he just goes back and forth. If you're a Republican on Capitol Hill, you've just got to be absolutely furious because now suddenly he said maybe it's not a wall, maybe it's slats. Now it's, oh, wall's a wall. And maybe it's because he likes that wall rhymes with fall. It is continued bizarre behavior from the president. But again, the group of people who end up losing in the end are the Republicans.
And how about the new rationale for the shutdown? We heard a few times yesterday from the president. It was an educational exercise. We shut down the government for 35 days and kept paychecks away from federal employees because I wanted to educate people about the problem at the border. Now they understand it, and now they'll be on my side. Unfortunately for him, the polls showed just the opposite. He was tweeting about, I think, 13 times yesterday before noon. He wrote, a wall is a wall. More troops being sent to the southern border. The wall is getting done one way or another. Warning of large caravans and, quote, all the evidence, proof, and caravans coming. The president also tweeted 3 separate caravans marching to our border. The numbers are tremendous. To which Congressman Eric Swalwell, a Democrat, responded, these caravans, do you see them in the room with you right now?
Oh, my God.
Donnie, it appears the president has learned exactly nothing from the 35 days of the shutdown. He thinks it worked for him.
You know, you listen to him this morning, and it's so easy to normalize this
insanity. I mean, if we just step back, and when this was not President Trump, this was somebody else, and in one fell swoop said, I had to educate people about this problem, so that's why I had to do this, where in effect we know statistically it's the opposite, that it's a 20-year low for immigration, that there are no prayer rugs there are no duct-taped women there. And then at the same time saying Nancy Pelosi is going to beg for a wall. This came out of his mouth. Nancy Pelosi is going to beg for this wall. This is the same day, when we get to this later, that he completely contradicts his intelligence heads on North Korea, on ISIS, and the Senate rebukes him on Afghanistan and Syria and aid for Saudi Arabia and their war to Yemen. He's in an alternate reality. He's insane. I mean, we laugh about it because it is so unsettling, but if we were objective from this and we had not lived through 25 months of it, you would say, I'm not overstating these, sir, he's out of his mind. I mean, he's literally out of his mind, and it's unhinged. It's absurd.
Yeah, so River now,
Really
so you, like Donnie, like Mika, like myself, we've all known Donald Trump for a long time. You've probably known him longer than most of us. I mean, do you recognize the guy, even if there were things about him before that you found abhorrent? Do you recognize the guy that you knew for 20 years, sitting in these pictures, rambling around, talking in circles? It makes no sense. He just got handed the worst political defeat that any Republican president's been handed since Watergate. And then he does this shutdown, which destroys his poll numbers even more. And here he is again, just going in this bizarre loop.
No, he's actually deteriorated, because we always knew he was a salesman, and he would, as Michael Bloomberg said, play the con man most of his career. But now you have gotten to where he's bizarre. To actually, when the Republicans are trying to blame the Democrats for the shutdown, he snatched his ownership back yesterday by saying, no, I did it so we could teach the American public the issue. So the whole argument that this was the Democrats being inflexible caused the shutdown, he just ripped up in shreds, which he would have read better than that 20 years ago. But the second part is the insensitivity. When he would meet with us, he would feign like he cared, or feigned like he had some kind of sensitivity. To say I reset the table when he literally took food off of federal workers' tables is really adding insult to injury here. I can't believe he'd even discuss a table when you're talking about federal workers that were literally out pawning their valuables so they could put food on the table. This is not even a con man's kind of way of operating. This is a man that has lost it.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything he does, John Podhoretz, is self-destructive. I mean, he keeps doing things that end up only hurting himself, only hurting the Republican Party, and at some point you do wonder, when do enough Republican senators say, you know what, before our approval rating goes down to 14%, maybe we should go over and have an intervention. But we did actually see that on the Senate floor yesterday. I guess that was a start, speaking out against his insane policies in Syria and Afghanistan.
Okay, so I'm going to make a quick case for what Trump is doing. Not that I'm a supporter of it, but you guys are all talking about the shutdown, and he's moving beyond the shutdown. What he's setting the table for, and what he is talking about setting the table for, is the declaration of the national emergency that will allow him to shift money over to at least make a cosmetic show of building the wall. It is possible that Nancy Pelosi is overplaying her hand, which is to say, in December, she agreed, they all agreed, to a $5.7 billion outlay for the wall. He shuts the government down because he decides it's not enough. He loses the shutdown, and now she is playing Michael Corleone in Godfather Part 2, saying to him, here's my offer, nothing, and you will swallow it, and I will humiliate you. Well, okay. That's an interesting political strategy. But as the year goes by, and I'm not sure that, the public thinks that the wall is insane. It may be that it's not valuable or it's not worth, but she is in fact not negotiating with him on the wall. She is saying zero, zip, zilch, nothing. And that is a change in her opinion from December. Now, I don't think that that necessarily means that she's going to lose this again, but it does allow him to make the claim that Democrats are not serious about border security, so I have to declare the national emergency. Now,
well,
I'm not.
But John, nobody is saying that any wall is insane.
Pelosi did say that walls are immoral, right? She handed him that. That was an unforced error.
Donald Trump's view of a huge, beautiful wall from sea to shining sea is not only immoral, more importantly, it's stupid and it's ineffective. And if you talk to anybody on the border, they will tell you that it is stupid and it's ineffective. But
it's not who we are on so many levels.
Let's not pretend here, John, that Poor Donald Trump is just trying to find somebody that will negotiate with him in good faith. You know, they tried to negotiate with him in good faith a year ago. He said around the table, said to Dianne Feinstein, you guys figure this out. I'll sign whatever you figure out. Then they came up with a plan that included a wall and DACA. Then Stephen Miller said, no, we can't have this plan. Then they sent the vice president to the Hill. And the vice president said, I'll tell you what, you say 1.7, we say 5.7, let's go 2.5, because he had authority to do that. Then the president takes that back. At some point you go, you know what, fool me once, shame on you.
Well,
fool
that's
me
what
twice,
Mitch McConnell,
as George W. Bush would say, don't get fooled again.
Right, but see, that's where I think Mitch McConnell did something interesting with the Syria and Afghanistan resolution. Because if you think that that is happening in isolation, that is foolish. Trump screwed McConnell in December terribly, right? And
just
McConnell
like he screwed the Democrats on immigration reform, and he's done it repeatedly. Why do you deal with that guy? You go, you know what? I'm not dealing with you, and you do this too. You go, I'm not dealing with you, Donald Trump. I'll tell you what. I'll talk to Mitch McConnell. You stay out of the way because you've lied to me repeatedly.
This isn't like a
you keep
sleazy
moving
real
the
estate
goalposts. I'm not wasting my time with you.
Yeah, but he's the president of the United States. I mean, that's the problem.
Yeah,
you can't just say, I'm not dealing with you.
You can't make
he has
a deal.
He has to sign legislation. I mean, I understand.
Which is why now, Elise, it is between Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. And Mitch McConnell knows that, and John Thune knows that, and the Republicans in the Senate know that, because Donald Trump has acted so irrationally for so long.
Well, I guess my response to what John was talking about would be that, you know, you can argue politically that Donald Trump looks like he is trying to negotiate, whereas the Democrats aren't. So you're saying that can be Trump's argument now. But his actual, what he's laying the groundwork for to declare a state of emergency because of this dire threat on the border, first allowing 3 weeks and then, you know, blaming it on politics as the reason not to declare a national emergency, while he might actually have this authority, the expansive authority of the executive, how much has he weakened his legal position, like he always does, simply by opening his mouth?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Mika, here again.
Yeah.
Again, here's the day trader. Mm-hmm. And he's actually got Lindsey Graham.
Which doesn't end well at the end of the day.
Poor Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
Like, who's just wandering around in an ideological field, wandering around in circles, just going, what's my name? Who am I?
Why is he doing it?
Hello, where am I? You have the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee that is encouraging Donald Trump to unconstitutionally seize power from the legislative branch, power that he does not have. So here, Mika, again, is Donald Trump the day trader, Donald Trump the guy that ends up embarrassing Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump the guy that ends up embarrassing John Thune, Donald Trump the guy that ends up embarrassing the Senate Republicans who actually are still serious, who actually still, Cory Gardner, who might actually like to win in 2020. He's going to declare this emergency. The Supreme Court is going to overturn it as unconstitutional because you take everything that Donald Trump has said.
Yeah.
You take everything that Donald Trump has done. You take the outlays of money over the last 2 years. You take that when the Republicans had control of Congress. You take the statistics of the border crossings over the past 15 years. You take the drug the drugs flowing into the United States, coming through 90% through legal ports of entry. The Supreme Court will look at this and laugh and probably overturn it 8-1, 9-0. And guess what? Then he and Lindsey Graham look like people who were trying to seize illicit control for the executive branch by Donald Trump. Well, it's all a losing endgame.
Well, and then there's this, which when you think about the threat assessment hearing from where the intel chiefs put out their gut information on, what are the biggest threats facing this nation, the Trump administration is planning another surge in the number of U.S. troops, wait for it, stationed along the southern border with Mexico, something that was not mentioned at all during that hearing. That's according to the House Armed Services Committee Chairman Adam Smith, who revealed the uptick in a letter to acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan. According to Smith, more than 3,500 troops will be sent to the border, bringing the number of active duty troops stationed there to 5,000. Defense officials have previously said more troops would be heading to the border starting in the middle of this month to build and reinforce about 160 miles of barbed or razor wire. Just one more thing, really quick. At the same time, we've also learned that the U.S. Border Patrol agents made the largest fentanyl drug bust in the agency's history over the weekend.
Good job.
Right?
Good job.
Right? Okay, so it happened, though, at an Arizona port of entry. Officers found nearly 650 pounds of illegal drugs inside a tractor trailer being driven into the U.S. by a Mexican national.
Okay, so Willie, 2 points. We'll handle the second story first. Good for them. Great job. But what does it prove? They all say they need more funding at legal ports of entry. They don't need a gold wall with Trump brand across the top of it. They need more money at these legal ports of entry to stop where the real drugs come into the United States that kill Americans. And then going back again to the story about sending troops to the border. More troops are going to be in the border.
It's nuts.
Than in Syria.
That's nuts.
An issue that every one of our intel chiefs and now the Pentagon is saying could lead to ISIS resurging and once again rebuilding their caliphate in Syria within the next 6 months.
Yeah, well, first of all, that seizure at the border was huge. Those drugs would have killed a lot of people. Almost 30,000 people died of fentanyl overdoses in this country last year. So that is a great job there. It did come through a port of entry. That's where all the research and analysis shows most 90% of those drugs are coming in, not through random places along the border. But to your other point, you put those two stories side by side. More troops, 3,500 more troops down to the Mexico border. The president wants the 2,000 troops that we have in Syria out of there. There's something wrong with that when our threat assessment talks explicitly about Syria being the place where ISIS could reconstitute itself and saying nothing about the problem along the border.
Yeah, we're still ahead.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.